When I got in the military, I thought I was going to go to Europe. I was all excited about going to Germany or, and being able to hang out in Paris and that kind of stuff. Vietnam was the last thing on my mind. And then I'll never forget my second day in basic training in Fort Ord. Early in the morning, you're up before dark, and we're standing in attention and formation. This guy comes in, big lieutenant, this green beret on, had all these patches all over his clothes, and he walked. This is 100, maybe 140, 150 guys all standing in attention and formation, and he walked down every row and looked every person in the eye as he walked down the road. And he came out in the front. But this is quiet now. Nobody's saying anything. He's just walking and looking you in the eyes. He walks back. And then he told us, he said, I want you guys to look at the person on your left. He said, now look at the person on your right. And he said, the odds are one of you will be dead this time next year. Interesting, because of my college background, when I got in the Army, they made me a platoon leader. The last thing I want to do is be in the Army. The last thing I want to do is be a platoon leader, But there was a lot of perks to it. So basic training was like being in football camp. Even not as hard because you would run sprints. You had to run a mile at the end of it with your pack on. But geez, that was nothing. Well, and then mentally, most of the guys were dumb. They were high school guys who really hadn't pushed the envelope. I was very naive about what was going on politically in Vietnam. I was really naive about what was motivating the war from the United States point of view politically. I was still more micro-focused on the civil rights movement and the fact that my participating in, this is really going to enhance my, stature as an African American when I get home. I'm going to be more accepted because I'm a soldier. And then I shipped out to Vietnam. We're going over there, plane load of guys, and we start approaching the coast of Vietnam, and the plane just does this steep dive, like that. Holy shit, Then we're not in Kansas anymore, Alice. So, first night there, you're in this huge base, Tan Son Nhut Air Base, and lots of people coming in, lots of people going. Nobody's got a weapon yet except the guys out on perimeter guard, doing guard duty and everything. But they have a big open screen TV, movie theater in the big field. It's maybe 200 guys in there watching, 200 guys sitting out on the ground watching this big movie. And I'm pretty sure it was the Cisco Kid or was Albert Abbott and Costello, one of the two. But I hear this getting louder and louder. What the hell? And somebody screaming, incoming, incoming. And then pandemonium. People are running everywhere. And I figure, oh shit, get into a bunker. I'm going to get into a bunker. And before I get to the bunker, I'm looking back because there's explosions now. The ground is shaking. Boom, boom. I'm looking back and I see these explosions come across the perimeter, maybe 100 yards away, 150 yards away. And they're, boom, just like, like ordnance going off like in training. But this is real shit. And it walked right across and the movie screen goes, boom, it's gone, So I dove into the bunker. I figured, so that's my first day in Vietnam. The thing that really, the dichotomy of what was real and what wasn't, we could be sitting in a yacht in the Saigon Yacht Harbor drinking cognac and watching fireworks from somebody dying on the horizon. Just the sky lit up because the battle was going on and you knew people were dying. And then it could be me. What really got me going, we ended up working with a group of people called the Montagnards. This is what really was an eye-opener for me and really radicalized me in Vietnam. We worked with these people. They were, quote, neo-Stone Age people who lived in the highlands. They were originally the Rad tribes that I understand came down on the coastline and got pushed inland hundreds of years ago by the Annamese people being pushed south by the Chinese. So the Annamese people pushed these rad tribes away from the coastal lands. They became mountain people living in the mountains. The French call them montagnards, I guess, which means mountain people. But I ended up working with them, living with them and working with them. And the Vietnamese had adopted a program called Idapine, very similar to what we did to the Native Americans here. They made the Montagnard tribal lands free fire zones because they were trying to stop the interdiction. They were trying to stop the arms from the Ho Chi Minh Trail. It never was a trail. It was just wherever arms were coming. There must have been 100 Ho Chi Minh trails with arms and men coming down into the South Vietnam. So they were coming through the Central Highland area. That was their easy route out of Laos. And then Cambodia was down at the Delta, and they used the Cambodia as well. But the poor Montagnards were caught in the middle of all this, and they were being round up and put on reservations, and then their ancestral lands being turned into just anything in there was live game. You know, it was live. So we were pretty pissed off about that. So here are these Montagnards. How do you teach them democracy? You know, they're tribal. They believe in the elders. They have the old ways, and all of a sudden we're there, teaching them how to use an M16 and send them out on ambushes and defend Vietnam. That's round them up and put them on reservations. I became very cynical. Suddenly the guys are starting to wear peace symbols on their helmets. You know, I mean, dope was everywhere. It was not isolated. Everybody started smoking weed over there, you know, especially the guys who had nothing to do. You know, they were drinking and smoking, and then you had guys coming back off the field. They were getting stoned. You weren't getting stoned out in the field, but when you're getting back, they were like, yeah, even out in the field, some guys did. They didn't live long. It was the Wild West, you know. The officers had this whole thing under control by a really thin veneer, Officers were getting fragged all over the country, and fragging was they get grenaded, you know, or out on the patrol they get shot. You know, so you had a really weird coalition going on all over. And this wasn't just isolated incidents. This was all over the country. And it was brutal. You know, toward the end of my tour, I could see a whole sourness happening because you had a year's tour of duty. And from day one, when you got out of the country, you started marking those days off. You started marking them off. And then when you got like 30 days, you were called a short timer. And you'd wake up, you'd just get on people's nerves by walking through and screaming, short, you know, and so they know that you were, you know, you're just rubbing it in. And then you start to get paranoid. The tighter time came when you're getting ready to leave the country, you start to get more and more paranoid. You start doing everything you can not to go out of patrol, you know, take on any missions. But you got to, because you can't let the guys down. When I got back, I was pretty traumatized. That's a good way, I guess, the nice way to put it. I was disillusioned with everything. I was disillusioned with America, because that's how we had just wrecked Vietnam. So I got really active politically. And when we marched, when we had the big march on Washington, and threw all my medals over the fence. And, got a letter from the Army, you know, they had taken our photographs. You know, what the hell, I got, you know. And, you know, we came back here, and nothing happened. You know, that the war didn't end any earlier. More guys got sent over. The death tolls climbed. But what I saw is the universities, I saw students starting to take to the streets, you know, really become active voice. So a few people got very, very, very wealthy. And a lot of people got very, very dead. The thing that also hit me is how the toll after the war, just on me personally. I was in therapy for close to 4 years after that, dealing with PTSD, and I still have my problems, you know, behind it. Still have nights when I wake up with cold sweats. I have friends who moved out of city. They live up in the woods. They've been living since they got back from the military in just isolated places because they can't live with people. They don't want to be around. They don't want to be a part of this. So they live outside of it as much as they can.
Generally, the Vietnam War was viewed, over TV. It was a TV war. You got to see LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson was the president. He was a dour, sourpuss kind of a guy, not really a popular president in the sense of appealing to young people. And, you saw these amazing nightly clips for 2 or 3 minutes of bombing raids and big bombers and troops going overseas and all that sort of stuff. There were no movies or or books written at that time, obviously. So it was really, you saw it on TV. I opted to be an ROTC because you were pretty much guaranteed to get an A, and the bottom line as a freshman in 1965 in college is you had to be in college and get a 2S deferment. Otherwise, you were going to get drafted and go to Vietnam. So, I made it a very strong point, for my own resolve to do actually the best I can and not goof off too much, which amazingly enough, these kids from Ohio didn't quite understand that. And they'd party and drink beer. You could drink beer at 18 years old in Ohio, 3.2. And these kids used to get polluted and party all the time, And I kind of, stuck to my my regime of, just studying and, being a well-rounded student, doing some athletics and what have you. But made sure I had passing grades, which all you needed really was a 2.0. If you had a 2.0, a C average, you were in college, and that was fine. And so I was in ROTC, and for a year and a half, I got A's in ROTC. You dress up in a little outfit, and you go marching around. You learn about some military tactics and what have you. And it was no big deal. And then when they asked you actually if you want to go advanced, going advanced means have your next 2 years of college, 4 years. I actually was in a 5-year engineering program. But if they asked you if you wanted to go advanced, and then when you graduated you would go into the Army as a second lieutenant, I said no way. So then I got a D that semester, and I was finished with my requirement for phys ed. And then I also remember in about, I don't know when it was, 69 maybe, or 68, I remember some of my friends, we were, living in apartments at that time because I was like a senior in college or something like that, or maybe my 4th year. We were sitting in the back seat of one of the kids' cars, and we all piled in there. There was about 10 of us in a big Oldsmobile 442, and we were listening to the lottery numbers being called. And that was pretty interesting because the rumor was if you had a low number, it didn't matter if you were in school or not, you would get drafted. So, that was another, milestone I remember during college. And, I must say that trip, the moratorium in Washington, that was a big, big event, and that was pretty impactful. It was also cold. Can you imagine Washington, I don't know, February or March? It was very cold. In retrospect, all through the 80s and 90s, you'd see some amazing documentaries of what the Tet Offensive was, and, you'd see these movies like Apocalypse Now and what have you, and, it sort of glorifies the war in many different ways, sometimes they were dark movies and sometimes they were just made for Hollywood, but you never really got a true sense of what the war was like because it was just fed to you on TV.
Can you imagine if we took our entire defense budget and said, okay, this is now going to become the education department. We're going to not only educate people around the world, we're going to educate our own people here at home. We used to joke in Vietnam, it's the 3 M's. The mission, we send the missionaries, then we send the money, then we send the Marines. So that's American foreign politics. Occupy was a squeak. It still is a squeak. The Vietnam protest was a roar. And every time I see a guy in uniform, I want to almost just run and shake him, What are you doing? What are you doing? But you can't, I'd lose my arms. There wasn't a whole lot of cultural activity happening. The Army's not known for its cultural activity, period. It's the most macho, idiot-driven organization in the world. Dysfunction. It operates on dysfunction.